Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Ovis Partners. I'm your host, Hugh McKnight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today's show, we're talking about the 8 steps you can take to handle higher interest rates. Now, last Saturday, I want to take you to a bar in Christchurch. It was 1 a.m. in the morning and I'm just dancing, vibing away. And who should come up to me? It was a girl. Now, I know what you're thinking, Andrew. She was asking for your number, wasn't she? Well, no, let me tell you, Katie was not asking for my number. Katie was asking for us.
I thought she was asking for mine.
No.
Why would she ask for yours?
Oh, because I'm sitting there vibing.
Okay.
And she wanted a podcast topic. And she said, I love your show. Can you talk about how to handle these higher interest rates? Now, we haven't covered this, can you believe it, since episode 959 about a year ago. So, Katie, this one is for you. Oh, and I'm very excited for this one because there's a big announcement that we get to talk about. But just before we get to that big announcement, Andrew, just for context, talk to us about what the cash flow looks like on a property today.
So look, cash flow is usually pretty tough at the moment. So most properties right now are negatively geared. And what that means is the rent doesn't cover all of the costs. So you have to make a contribution. So for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see Ed's return on investment cash flow here. And you can see that there's a top up of quite a chunky amount of money to hold this property. And look, the reality is because you might have been fixed at 3% and the rent was fine to cover the mortgage and the other costs, now you're about to go on to say 6.5%. Yep, you are going to be probably making a contribution. That's just the maths of it.
So strategy number 1 is not to go for the cheapest rate. Now, Kiwis tend to go for just whatever happens to be the cheapest rate at the time. And usually the cheapest rate is the 1-year fixed interest rate. And those who have just kept on going for the 1 year have done quite well. But at the moment, quite a number of interest rates are what we call inverted. So the 5-year rate or the 3-year fixed interest rate might be lower than the 1 year. So I'm looking here at ASB's interest rates. The 5-year is 6.5% and the 1 year is just below 6.85%. So by that, you'd look, okay, well, the 5-year rate's cheaper. Maybe I should go for that. But what often happens when interest rates become inverted like this, where the longer term rates are cheaper, and I realize that this is not the same for every single bank, but it is for ASB at the moment and also TSB, I can see. When this happens, often that is suggesting that markets think that interest rates are going to come down sooner. So back in 2008, we had the same situation and then interest rates came down. And you might look at the 5-year rate today and say, that looks cheaper than the 1-year rate, so I'm going to go for that. But in 3 years' time, that interest rate might look really, really expensive. And while interest rates are high at the moment, we are forecasting, and most banks are forecasting, that will ease down. And so I would not be going just for the cheapest rate right now because it might look extremely expensive in 12 to 36 months' time.
And then the next strategy flowing on from that is shop around for the cheapest rate for the term that you want. So for example, if you've said, okay, I'm going to go for the 1 year fixed, then look for the cheapest rate amongst the banks or the non-bank lenders as well. So because there are fewer people out there buying houses right now, there's a lot of competition for banks to acquire a new customer. And so the way they do that is they go and pinch you from SBS or they pinch you from Kiwibank. And so because there's that fighting going on, often you'll find that you might get a better deal by shopping around. And in fact, a good example of this is just last week, one of the major banks came out with an amazing 1 year rate, 4.99%, which is about 1.5% off their advertised rate. So it's not always just what's the advertised rate.
So the key thing here, though, is that they are not advertising that they have effectively a 5% 1 year fixed interest rate. And actually, we're not even allowed to tell you who that bank is. And I'm guessing that's possibly because they don't want their existing customers to know that that rate is there. But if you talk to your mortgage broker, they'll be able to tell you.
Yeah, and there are some conditions around it, as often is the case with these really, really discounted rates. So there's no cashbacks. You have to have at least a 20% deposit for an owner-occupied property and at least a 40% deposit for an investment property, and only available to new customers as well. So again, talk to a mortgage broker if you want to look at something like that. But again, you want to be shopping around to see who's got the lowest rate based on the term that you choose.
And no cashback on that one as well. Now, speaking of cashback, strategy number 3 is to use the big cashbacks on offer. So there are some banks out there that if you sign up with them as a new customer, they will give you 1% of your mortgage back. So if you've got $1 million mortgage, that means they are going to put $10,000 in some cases into your bank account. Now, that is effectively a 1% discount on the rate you're paying in that first year. So what some property investors will do is they might take that $10,000 and use that to cover some of the negative cash flow that their investment properties are going to have. So that can help ease the cash flow over time. Just bear in mind though, that if you do take a cash back from a bank, you're probably going to be locked in with them for 3 years. And if you try and change banks after that, they are going to claw some of that back. But that's one way to handle those higher interest rates.
Strategy number 4, which is one of my absolute favourites, is to use a revolving credit facility to smooth out the higher interest rates that you're paying right now. Now, I'm going to show you an example if you're watching this on YouTube, or I'll describe it for you if you're listening on your podcast app. So what you can do with a revolving credit is you can put aside the amount that you're comfortable making, and then you can use revolving credit or debt to cover the shortfall. For example, in this case, if you're watching it online, in years 2 and 3, your contribution that you're comfortable making is less than what's actually required to top up that property. So you might only need a $20,000 revolving credit facility, for example. You make your $200 a week top up, and it might be costing you $300 a week. So there'll be a couple of years where you'll go into debit on your revolving credit facility. But once the interest rates go back down, you continue to pay that $200 a week contribution, and you'll pay back the revolving credit amount.
So let me just make sure I've got that straight, because there was a lot of nerdy mortgage broker stuff in that. So I'm just going to put $200 a week in to top up this property. And then if there's extra contributions required because interest rates are higher, then I'll use my revolving credit to pay the difference. Have I got that right?
You'll bridge that gap. And then as rates come down, you continue to make that $200 a week contribution, which might be more than you need, but you pay back that debt that you've used.
To pay it off. And if you want to model this out at home, you can use our return on investment spreadsheet in order to see what that would look like. The link's down in the description, free to download. Now, strategy number 5 is to reduce your personal mortgage payments. So one of the things that's really difficult is not only are the interest rates on your investment properties going up, but possibly on your owner-occupier mortgage as well. And one thing you could do to free up cash flow is to extend the term of your personal mortgage. So let's say you've got a $500K mortgage and we're paying a 6.5% interest rate. If you are paying that off currently over 15 years, you're going to be making a weekly repayment to the bank of just over $1,000. Now, if you were to extend that out and say, I'm not going to pay my mortgage off over 15 years now, I'm going to do it over 30 years, that decreases your repayment to the bank by $275 a week. Now, if you are struggling to hold on to your investment properties or your owner-occupier home because of those higher interest rates, extending out that mortgage term, extending the time that you're paying off that mortgage can help ease cash flow. Now, you might not want to do this forever, just while interest rates are high, because you might think, well, I'm paying it off over 15 years. Do I really want to pay my own home mortgage off over 30 years? No, I want to be mortgage free even sooner. But you might just do this for a short time if you're struggling with cash flow, just to give yourself some breathing room.
Yeah, and then you increase the payments later on, say 2-3 years down the track, and you might make it a 12-year term at that stage so that you're still paying it off in that same length of time. Strategy number 6 is to reduce your Kiwisaver. Now, again, This isn't personalised financial advice. This is just some suggestions for you. But if you're paying more than you need to at the moment to get your employer contribution, one option is to reduce your contributions to just the employer's contributions, or even you could pause your payments if you wanted to. So say, for example, you're on $100,000 a year salary right now, and you're putting 8% into Kiwisaver and your employer matches 3%. Well, you might drop your 8% down to the 3%, so you're still contributing to your Kiwisaver, you're still getting your full benefit of the employer contribution, and you're still getting the government contribution, but you've saved yourself 5% of your income, which is $5,000 a year, roughly $100 a week that you're going to save that you can put towards that rental property. Now, again, you might not want to do this long term. You might want to build up your Kiwisaver, and that's absolutely fine. But you might do this again to give you that breathing space right now. And you're still investing. You're still putting money aside. You're just putting it into a different asset.
And it always comes down to what the situation is, because for some people, if they're going to have to sell their investment property, potentially at a loss because they can't afford the cash flow and the higher interest rates, then moving around your money or putting lease into Kiwisaver could be the right option. Now, strategy number 7 is what we call earn baby earn, which is to increase your income. Now, I have been talking to people a lot recently about how employers are really struggling to find good staff. In fact, a net 68% of employers say that it is difficult to find skilled employees, and about 59% say it's hard to find unskilled employees. Now, that means that people are more willing to pay to retain their staff, because the cost of recruiting a new staff member and giving them an attractive salary package to bring them on, that's really high. So a lot of employers, and certainly that's us thinking about that as well at the moment, Andrew, are saying we need to pay our staff more so that we're able to retain them. So it's an excellent time to be asking for a pay rise. Now, I want to give you some numbers around this. If you were to negotiate a $10,000 pay rise, that could be an extra $120 per week coming into your bank account after tax, after ACC, after Kiwisaver, of course, depending on whatever tax bracket you are currently in. And I meet people all the time, Andrew, just on the street like Katie, or at their unce bars, as I like to call them. But people listening to the show saying, hey, they have negotiated, in some cases, quite significant pay rises because we berated them on the show into going ahead and doing it.
I hope they bought you a drink.
Actually, Louis, another person that I met that night, offered, but I think I was already a couple of gin and tonics deep.
You were too many as it was. Strategy number 8 is another one of my favourites. If you've got kids at home and you can charge them board, absolutely do it. And I'll give you a great example of this. So I had a couple of investors that I've been working with for a number of years, and they came back to see me and they said, we need to do our wealth, figure out what our wealth gap is. We didn't have the software when we first met. I put it in and we were so close to closing their wealth gap, but they needed one more property and they needed to do it soon because they're getting to the later part of their work life. So I said, look, we're going to get something in Auckland. We ran the numbers. It was about a $200 a week contribution at that stage for them. They said, well, we can't scrap together that extra $200. Now, I know their 2 daughters have been living at home and been on the pig's back for years. So I said, are you charging them board yet? And they said, no. Great. Go home and tell them they're paying $100 a week board, and that will be your rental property. So they went ahead and did it, and that now covers and allowed them to close that retirement gap.
And I think the other thing is, if you're buying today, you've also got to think about the deal you're getting, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to remember there's always market factors that are working for and against you. So 18 months ago, it was harder to get a good deal, but your interest rates were lower. Now you can get really good deals, but your interest rates are high. So you've just got to work with what the deal is on the day and not overthink it too much. Make sure it works for you. But again, there will always be positives and negatives of any market.
And what I do want to say is, if you see us out at a bar or a restaurant, make sure you come up and say hello. I met another person I just mentioned before. This one was at Brightside in Christchurch. A guy called Louis, who actually, his parents I think, own now the apartment that you used to live in.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
And he was telling me about how he's just done his first as-is property based on what he's learned on the show.
Awesome.
And so I thought that was really cool. So Katie and Louis, thanks for stopping to say hi. And this one's for you guys. We're going to wrap it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you want to use our My Wealth Plan software, which helps you figure out, should I use the Golden Goose or should I use Nest Egg? And how many properties am I going to need to buy, or how many assets am I going to need in order to use that strategy? You can use it absolutely for free. Just go to mywealthplan.opuspartners.co.nz. I tell you what, links down in the description. Tap or swipe over the cover art. You'll find it in there. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Knight.
And I'm Andrew Nicole.
We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the property market. Until next time.